I'm Biom, Chishtei Tafshin Lamed Aleph. We are in the middle of Ois Zayin. So until now, we're explaining the concept. What is Asher? What is Nasi Livnei Asher? What's the 11th day? The fact that there's no two separate aspects, there's no two separate concepts, there's just godliness. There's nothing else which even causes the person to want godliness. It's the oneness that a Jew has with Hashem, that there is nothing else. And what does that come from? That comes from the wisdom, the pichus of the Jew, that he doesn't want all the ministers that are with the king. He doesn't want the Lutin and the Duchsin and the Ifrichin, all of their various types of ministers. All he wants is the king himself. Why does he want the king himself? Why do the others choose the other things? The others choose the other things because they want themselves. They want what is good for them, because that's the nature of a human being as a yesh, as a separate existence that doesn't fully feel the complete oneness with Hashem, that I want myself. The Jew, what does he want? He wants Hashem because he doesn't want anything else. He's not looking for himself. He's only looking to serve the king. That's all he wants. That's all he cares about. That is the total negation of Avodah Zarah in the fullest way, because Avodah Zarah in the most refined way is the fact that I'm looking for myself. I care about myself. I care about my own existence. I care about my own ego. I care about what I'm going to get out of it. The Jew doesn't look for what he's going to get out of it. Now, why is that called from the essence of the soul? It makes sense. I want the king. I don't want anything else. And the reason is because the nature of the mind, of the intellect of a human being, because it's the intellect of a creation, is that it wants what's good for it. The fact that a Jew is ready to forego the fact that he can get some extra things, at least temporarily, from the other ways, and he doesn't have to work in order to get it. Because all he wants is the king, means that comes from something of the essence, but that essence then has an effect on his mind, on his intellect, that he also understands it intellectually, and that's an amazing thing, that his human mind, which usually only wants what's good for him, understands that all that's good is the king, because everything else changes, everything else is temporary, the king is the only thing that lasts forever, and therefore that's the only thing that's real, and that's the only thing that I can want. Then we continue to explain with the whole mashal of the different aspects, what's on by the king's table and what's outside of the king's table. King makes a party. Who does the king have in mind? Who does the king invite to his table? What does it mean? Who are those that are connected to the king? Who are those that actually have some type of connection to godliness? And who are those who are outside of the king's table? So we say the lowest level that's outside of the king's table is the dogs. The dogs, they're not interested in anything. They want kuloi leiv, it's all heart, it's all me, me, me. The next level is the simple servants. The simple servants, meaning they're slaves who their entire reason why they're serving the king is also for themselves, because they're afraid of being bitten. Otherwise, they wouldn't do what the king wants. They're outside of the king's table, and therefore things aren't meant for them, because they're not connected to godliness. When they receive, they're receiving something which is an existence, an existence which isn't godliness, and therefore that's not what it's all about. Then you have the important servants, who they serve the king because they want to serve the king. That's one level. A second level is the ministers, who not only they're serving the king like the servants, which is with Kabbalah, so they're doing it because that's what they're supposed to do. But the ministers who actually understand, they connect to the behavior, to what's going on in the kingdom. And then there's the important ministers, and that's those who are by the table. And then the Rebbe explains that these three levels that are by the king's table, these are like the Hayu Imai. They're with the king the Ifrichin, Istiritilutin, and the Duchsin, which means all the various ministers, meaning that we're not just saying that the king comes into the country, as we say, as we understood it earlier, that there's Hashem, and there's all the things through which he gives the Ashpa, which are the Ayin Sarim, what means the 70 ministers that are in charge of the 70 nations, meaning all the stars and the constellations, etc., all the other things that through which Hashem gives the Ashpa into the world, which the Goyim think that that's where the real Ashpa is coming from, but that's something which is outside of the king's table. No, we say Hayu Imay, they're with the king, meaning we're talking actually about the Ayin, the Sarim Shalamayla, the angels, the spiritual powers, the spiritual things which are godliness. And this is the ultimate wisdom of the Pikech. He says, I don't want that either. I'm not interested in that either. The Malachim, which they're batal talakus, which they are by the king's table. Even the Malachim of Atzilus, the Spheres of Atzilus, which are completely one with godliness. The Pikeach, the Jew says, I'm not interested in anything but the Malka, the king himself, the Eibusher himself. Not only he's saying, I'm not interested to get hashpa like the dogs, like the lowly servants who they're in existence other than the king, who the king isn't interested in giving to them. Even the ones who are getting hashpa from the king, I also don't want. All I want is the king himself. Not even those who are in the king's table, Ananas and Malka. That's an amazing wisdom of the Pikeach, that he realizes, I want to go directly to the king, to nothing else. Not even spiritual things. And the Rebbe explains this based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. It says in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Tefillah liyani chiyatev, v'lifnei havaya yishpech sichai. The tefillah for a poor man who wraps himself up, and all he wants, and his entire desire that he's asking for, he's a poor man, he has nothing. But what does he want? What does he ask Hashem for? He says, I want only that lifnei havai yishpech sichai. I want to be able to pour my heart out before Hashem. That's all I'm interested in. That needs, and that's something which requires a very great wisdom. And like the famous mashal of when you come into the king's palace and you go into one room after another, and in each room there's treasures, amazing treasures. And in each room that you're going into a more inner chamber, the treasures are unbelievably more amazing. And one has to be very wise and very focused, that not to be caught up by all the treasures, no matter how amazing they are, and to still have his focus that all his will is to go into the inner chamber and to see the king. And it's the same thing with a Jew. A Jew isn't even interested in the Malachim, in the Spheres of Atzilus, and all the spiritual powers and levels that there are, even though they're batal to Hashem. Because he says, all I want is the king himself, I want Hashem himself. That comes from the essence of the soul of a Jew, which realizes that all I want is Atzmos, the essence of Hashem. And now the Rebbe continues in Ois Ches, that this concept is what it says in Tehillim, Mi li vashamayim v'imcha lechafatzti ba'aretz. Who is for me in the heavens? And besides for you, I don't want anything else in earth. What does that mean? It's not just in earth. It's not just in the physical worlds that I don't want anything else. Even up in the heavens, in the spiritual, in the most spiritual levels, I don't want anything, like the Alter Rebbe said at the time of his Veikos, Ich will ze garnist, I don't want anything. Ich will nit dein Gan Eden, I don't want your Gan Eden. Ich will nit dein Elam Haba, I don't want your Elam Haba. Ich will mer nit as dich allein, all I want is you. Gan Eden. Gan Eden is such an amazing place with revelations of godliness. Olam Haba, even more than that. The Alter Rebbe understood what all those things are. And yet, not just he understood it in the most powerful way. And yet the Alter Rebbe says, I'm not interested in any of those. All I want is only Atzmos, the essence of Hashem. And that is the Pikchus, That is the wisdom of the Pikeach, that he says, I don't want the Duchsin, I don't want any of the levels, any of the spiritual levels. Even though, what are they? Spheros. Spheros means they shine. They shine a revelation of godliness. I'm not interested in any of this. Because even though the hashpah that comes through the spirits, you can see, it's not like the Kechav Mazal, it's like the stars and constellation. You can see that all they are is a revelation of godliness. And yet I don't want that. I don't want that. Anan Nasiv Malka, all I want is the king. And that's what the Alter Rebbe said, Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden. I don't want your Gan Eden. It's yours. It's your Gan Eden. It's a revelation of you. I don't want that. I don't want Dain Elamah, but your Elamah, but the highest revelations there are. Says the Alter Rebbe, all I want is Atzmus, I want the essence of Hashem. Because that's the ultimate of Chelki Havaya Amra Nafshi. My soul is connected to nothing else. It's not about the spiritual things, because the spiritual things would be, there's some type of understanding in it, there's some type of grasp in it. The essence of the soul wants only Atzmus, the essence of Hashem, because nothing else exists. And that the Rebbe continues in test. That's the meaning of Anan Nasiv Malka. A person doesn't want any of the spiritual levels, he only wants Atzmus. What does it mean? And so the Rebbe says, we have here two things. We have Anan Nasiv Malka, which is in the simple meaning of the mashal, which is that I don't want the Kechavim Mazalis. I don't want it to get myself, which is Avodah Zarah in Bedakos in a more refined way, and sometimes even Avodah Zarah in the simple sense of serving the idol, worshipping the stars and constellations, or even in the more refined way that I'm not looking for myself, all I want is to serve the king. That's one idea of Anan Nasiv Malka. Then we have Anan Nasiv Malka on the deeper level. I don't even want the holy things. I don't even want Kedusha. I don't even want all the spheres of above. How's the connection between these two things? So the Rebbe says, where does it come from, this love that a person says, Mili v'shamayim, I don't want any revelations, I don't want Gan Eden, I don't want anything else. In Gan Eden, a person will still remain the person, the neshama remains, and he'll have the most amazing pleasure of godliness. He'll have the most amazing pleasure of of the pleasure from the shine of Hashem, of understanding and grasping godliness. But when the person reaches the idea of dich alein, of the essence of Hashem, he doesn't exist anymore. So Gan Eden is that the person exists, and has the most amazing, wonderful pleasure, not physical, but the spiritual pleasure. But then when a person chooses dich alein, he says, I don't want this. I want Atzmos, even though I won't exist. Similar to the idea of why the mind, the human intellect, refuses to take something with which I'm going to disappear. But here the person says, I'm ready to disappear because I just want my connection with the essence of Hashem, even though there I'm not going to gain anything. Why? Because Gan Eden is only a ziv, it's only a shine of the Shekhinah. Whereas Atzmos Ein Sof, that's what the person wants, because the person is choosing the main thing and not the secondary thing. Which means that when a person chooses and he says, I want to have Gan Eden, I want to have, in order that I should spiritually have that spiritual pleasure, and I should still exist and have the pleasure of Elokus, when you look at that idea, the way it comes down, level after level, in the most refined way, it comes down to the idea of him allowing himself to want to have the ashpah from the kechav mazalis, even though it comes from the place of death, as long as I gain, as long as I get something. Whereas when the person says, all I want is atzmos, all I want is the essence of Hashem, he's taking away everything. In other words, we're saying that even when a person wants Gan Eden, he wants Elam Haba, he wants the spiritual revelations, in a refined way, that means I still want I should exist in order that I should be able to get something. Whereas the true essence of a Jew is that I want to give myself up in order to connect to Atzmos of Hashem. The person who wants to exist B'dakos, the dakos, in the most refined way from this, there can come that I should want to get stuff for myself, and I'm ready even to go and get it from the kechav mazalos in the place of death. And in order that there shouldn't be even a place that a person should want to duchsin, meaning the ministers in the negative way, which are the kechav mazalis, that's through the fact that a person arouses at least in a little bit that I don't even want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Elam Haba, I don't even want spirituality, all I want is you yourself, Hashem himself, the essence of Hashem.